Retail stocks are on the decline, and the U.S. consumer may finally be done with inflation and this economy. D-Day, October 1st, when student loan payments restart.
Yeah, listen, even with the grace period, this is going to have an immediate impact. We're hitting the fourth quarter here. This is make or break time for every retailer and brand in America. You know, most brands make and retailers about 70% of their yearly income in this coming quarter. So the timing of this really couldn't be worse. Listen, CNBC has been doing a great job of covering this. We've seen Cameron McNair report that 56% of borrowers are going to be choosing between groceries and paying back their student loans. 70% of college students with debt saving, who are coming out now are afraid for their careers. And so you have this double whammy of two groups really being hit hard. You have millennials who are in their 40s with their own kids going back to school. You have recent graduates. This is going to be a disaster for retail in the fourth quarter.
Now, this is just to give everybody a heads up. This may be a sign that we're actually headed toward another October surprise moment, very similar to the Great Depression or more recently, the Great Recession. And like the guy said, Q4 is usually the time when most retailers and restaurants get 70% of their annual income, sometimes even more than that. But what happens if the US consumers have finally hit their limit? Well, it looks like we may actually find out. Retail stocks, they're already dropping like rocks, with retailers after retailer plunging by double digits on either weak earnings or poor guidance or some kind of combination of the two, right? Not to mention the retail ETF got crushed in all 5 days this week, sharply underperforming the market every single day of the week. Now, of course, retail optimists and stock market bulls are real quick to dismiss this kind of thing as, something transitory. Now, remember how they called inflation transitory when it was first starting out? Well, just look at where we are right now. Now, to be sure, there have been some major developments, specifically when it comes to the rapid deterioration in consumer credit, which, by the way, we saw in the low, dismal earnings reports from Macy's and from Nordstrom's. And with student loan debt payments set to resume and President Biden's stimulus checks completely run out, experts say that the trend will only get worse. Now, here's some things that they talked about. So first, the month of August, when things started to really turn ugly, outside of Foot Locker, nearly every company spoke to an acceleration in their trends in July. Acceleration in trends sounds kind of good, but in reality, the trends that they're talking about are actually the slowing down of the consumer activity. And so this was the first notable acceleration in trends for a month ever since things first saw their initial slowdown back in March. So number two, we got retail shrink, aka retail theft. People just grabbing stuff and walking out the stores. What all companies had in common was all stocks traded down on this. And it may get worse as some cities have largely decriminalized retail theft. Number three, you got consumer credit. So Macy's touched on consumer credit concerns when they talked about higher than expected credit card delinquencies in June and July. Supposedly, it was just to normalize a pre-C19 level, and this was more of a low-income issue. Didn't affect everybody. But recently, Nordstrom, which usually caters to a higher income customer, also noted the exact same trend, saying that they've seen delinquencies rising gradually and they are now above pre-pandemic levels, which could very well result in higher credit losses in the second half and going into 2024. Now take note, guys, higher than pre-pandemic levels of credit card delinquencies, this ain't good. Something we should really be paying close attention to. And this all before student loan repayments start back up. They say that this is going to hit retail hard, with that cohort of shoppers making up more than 10% of spending at several national brands in 2022. Their spending also outperformed non-borrowers at several retail brands. Some of them having to pay their student loans definitely ramped up their spending. And so that leaves dozens of national brands that benefited meaningfully from the pause in student loans. Most apparel and department stores had over 10% share from the C19 suspended cohort. Old Navy had the highest share at 14%. Nordstrom full price had the lowest shares at 8%. Old Navy and Burlington each had 3 points of outspending from the cohort, while most others saw minimal to underspending. But of course, people seem to forget how percentages work. Inflation doesn't mean prices are going down, rather the rate of increase is going down. So to make ends meet, Americans are beginning to borrow money that they really just can't afford to pay back. And I think everybody's already feeling it. The New York Fed just reported that credit card, auto loan delinquency rates, they're all now higher than they were before the pandemic. Now, to be specific, The rate of new credit card delinquencies hit 7.2% in the second quarter of 2023, passing pre-C19 levels. Meanwhile, the rate of new auto loan delinquencies hit 7.3% in the same period, also above pre-pandemic levels. Credit card debt jumped by $45 billion to a record high of $1.03 trillion in the second quarter of this year. I can't believe we're saying trillions of dollars of credit card debt at this point. And so basically, you got Americans using credit cards to cope with inflation and the rising cost of living. Pretty sure keeping up with the Joneses is mixed in there too, but you also got the Fed's 11 interest rate hikes over the last 18 months, and they've only made it way more expensive to borrow money via credit cards, car loans, mortgages, and other personal loans. The average credit card APR right now is 24.37%, which also partially explains this new delinquency rate. Now, according to the data from the credit agency TransUnion, the average credit card debt per consumer rose in Q2 to $5,947, which is up from $5,733 in Q1 and still higher than Q2 22's average of $5,270. So what about you guys? How are your credit card balances doing? By the way, if you own a home, make sure your home is protected. Get your free home warranty quote. There's a link in the description down below this video. Now, we are also seeing the same thing with auto loans. The average auto loan APR on used and new vehicles stood at 7.2% and 11.1% respectively. Now, the data also shows an increase in consumers who now have monthly car payments of $1,000 or more across a number of states. Now, what's scary is when you can't keep up with your monthly payments when you borrow money. You could end up paying interest on your interest, and your debt can quickly spiral out of control, forcing you into delinquency or even default. And with student loan payments set to resume in October, millions of Americans may have an even harder time digging their way out of a growing pile of debt. Now, we're talking about 2.5 million student loan borrowers who had at least one delinquent non-student loan as of March of this year. Now, that's another delinquency rate that is now higher than it was before the pandemic. Now, if Americans borrow more money and they rely on credit cards to maintain their spending levels, that could potentially drive delinquency rates even higher. I feel like I'm watching a train wreck in slow motion, and it's gradually speeding up as we get closer to D-Day in October. Definitely stay tuned for the updates, guys. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. And if you really want to show your support for the channel to help keep our YouTube lights on, give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate that, guys. And it's not just borrowers that are bracing for the impact of student loan payments resuming. Some of America's biggest retail and food chains, they have all been preparing investors for a slowdown in consumer spending as the more than 3-year pause in student loan payments comes to an end. So Macy's says that student loans, along with other forms of consumer debt, they're all going to come into focus in the next month or two. Same with Walmart, the world's largest retailer. They talked about how jobs, wages, and pockets of disinflation, they're all helping their consumers. But rising energy prices, resuming student loan payments, higher borrowing costs, and tightening lending standards, not to mention a drawback in excess savings, it means that household budgets are still under pressure. Now again, D-Day is on October 1st as payments resume then. Now, according to experts' estimates, roughly 40 million customers will face the payment shock when student loan debt relief ends. People are already having trouble paying off credit card debt, as Macy's warned this week. Now, the return of student loan payments could make things even worse. Company execs warn that the extra expense may lead consumers to pull back spending in all areas. Investment analysts are also warning the alarm bells too. They highlighted Target and Ulta as particularly vulnerable due to their exposure to younger, low-income customers with student loans. Target is well aware of the dangers, and they're saying that this resumption of student loan repayments is one of many factors that we'll be watching really closely. But what can they do about it? I mean, you can kind of watch the train wreck, but what are they going to do? Stop in front of the train? So U.S. consumer debt borrowers will likely pull back spending on apparel overall, since they prefer brands over private label and specialty retailers over the discounters. Now, this is bad news for retail stocks like American Eagle, Outfitters, Carter's, Crocs, Canada Goose, The Gap, Nordstrom, Nike, Steve Madden, Under Armour, and even Victoria's Secrets. I kind of miss Fredericks of Hollywood. Too bad they went under. Now, when it comes to spending at restaurants, they estimate up to a 2% annual headwind to restaurant industry spending as student loan payments resume. Stocks like Jack in the Box, Dutch Brothers, and Sweetgreen are probably most exposed. Now, there's also tobacco and beverage brands like Ultra Group, British American Tobacco, and Monster Beverage. Some people, they're taking out a consolidation loan to pay off high interest credit card loans. Now, these loans are around 10% for 2 years, but there are people who find them helpful. I mean, I guess I'd rather be paying 10% rather than 20+%, right? Both situations suck, but one sucks a lot less. But really, I think you guys get it. Resuming student loan payments, they're going to have an impact on the economy overall, and it's going to hit us hard. Now, overall, the resuming of student loan payments will pull $70 billion a year out of the economy. And for the first time in 3 years since the C-19 pandemic, more than 43 million American borrowers will all of a sudden once again start racking up interest on federal student loans. And so basically, during the whole pandemic pause, loan borrowers were spending money on other things because they didn't have loan payments to make. Starting October 1st, though, when repayments restart once again, impacted households will have less money to spend on goods and services. Just over half of next year's college grads expect to carry student loan debt. And within that group, almost 70% say that their debt will influence their jobs, the jobs that they consider after graduation. For example, many students say finding a job with a high salary and with a company that offers attractive benefits like student loan repayment benefits, they're all top of mind. They also want flexibility in where and when they work so that they can use that flex time to work other jobs to cover their bills. More than 40% of college seniors, they're already expecting to pursue gig or freelance work after graduation, with nearly a third saying that they'll do it on top of a full-time job. Full-time jobs nowadays ain't cutting it, especially not for millennials. Nearly half are saying that they plan to put in these extra hours because they're going to need the additional income in order to pay their everyday expenses and their debt. And people keep talking about burnout. These graduates, a majority, 80% of the class of 2024, they're already reporting that they've already burned or at least felt burned out as undergrads, basically having feelings of persistent exhaustion, a lack of motivation, and unusual negativity or cynicism. And burned out students are already worried that those feelings would just go on as they start their careers. 25% of seniors, they're saying that they're highly worried about being burned out once they start working. Now, as for where they want to work, 41% of college seniors are saying that they're more likely to apply to a hybrid job, nearly double the share of the 22% who said that they want a more remote job. HR experts recommend offering benefits like loan repayments and mental health benefits. Yep, those are definitely things that these companies need to be offering right now.